Hello and welcome to the Excerpt. I'm Dana Taylor. Russian President Vladimir Putin has been making international headlines this week, just 6 days from what will be the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Stories about troop buildup along Russia's border with NATO and the possibility of nuclear space weapons are just two of many news stories out in recent weeks. Are Putin's ambitions in Europe shifting, and how worried should the United States, arguably his biggest foe, be? To learn more about this fast-developing situation, I'm joined now by USA Today's Pentagon correspondent, Vanden Brook. Thanks for being on the Excerpt, Tom.
Dana, thanks for having me.
Let's start with the bombshell news last week regarding Putin's ambition to put nuclear weapons in space. What's the story here, Tom?
The story has to do with satellite weapons, and specifically weapons that Putin wants to put into space to hamper our satellites. And obviously satellites govern a variety of things that we do, from GPS to communication. So it's a big concern. The White House is trying to downplay this and said that these weapons have not been deployed. It's a capability it hopes to deploy. So it hasn't been sent into space yet.
Also last week, the Estonian Foreign Spying Agency released its annual report. Its director general spoke with reporters and said Russians are planning to increase the military force along the Baltic states border, but also the Finnish border. How worrisome is that development from a military perspective?
Well, it would be worrisome given that when he last massed forces along the Ukrainian border, he actually invaded there. However, he's got Putin has a war on his hands, obviously, that's mauled his armed forces in Ukraine. So whether he wants to open another front seems pretty doubtful, but you can never bank on exactly what he's going to do.
Finland just gained membership into NATO, the world's largest military alliance, just last year. Sweden also vying for membership, with Germany saying just last week, according to Reuters, that needed to happen now. What do these developments mean for the alliance?
They're a huge plus for the alliance. Having two democracies with developed, very sophisticated, well-trained militaries on Russia's border, a 900-mile border with Finland, and then having Sweden also join means two very potent partners for NATO joining the alliance. And it has to be a major concern for Putin, who is trying to split the alliance, and instead he's seeing it grow considerably.
When we talk about NATO, a common focal point for discussion is the importance of Article 5. What is Article 5 and how central is it to this Western alliance?
It's fundamental to it. Simply put, it means if one member is attacked, the others have to go to that country's aid. It's been invoked only once, and it's when the United States was attacked on 9/11.
NATO leadership met just last week in Brussels. What news came out of that, Tom?
I think the main thing for our folks, our readers and listeners and viewers to know is what Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said afterward. He reiterated a point that President Biden has made, that the U.S. remains committed to protecting every inch of NATO territory. So we're saying to Putin, don't try anything. Otherwise, you'll face all of NATO.
The Estonian intelligence report comes as likely Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump said over the weekend that he would encourage Russia to do, quote, whatever the hell they want, end quote, to any NATO member country that doesn't meet the 31-nation military organization's defense spending guidelines, currently 2% of GDP. How concerning are his comments to America's NATO allies?
Well, very concerning. I mean, that's central to the alliance, right? And whether or not he would follow through on that is another matter. He threatened, countries when he was president. If he becomes president again, would he do that? Would he allow another nation to be attacked without responding? Well, that would violate Article 5. So it's got to be a tremendous concern, and it already is. I mean, we're already seeing the Secretary General of NATO speak out against it. So it's a concern for certain.
President Joe Biden condemned Trump's NATO threat as an un-American signal to the world. Is there any precedent here, Tom, for the U.S. to pull out of an alliance like NATO? And what might be the impact if we did?
Well, I don't know that there's any direct precedent to it. when Trump was president before, he talked about removing all of our troops from South Korea, where there are 28,000 posted to prevent a reinvasion from the north. That didn't happen, obviously, but it caused a lot of jitters. So it hasn't happened. Whether it does happen is another matter. And it would, again, if we were to remove ourselves from NATO, it would shatter what has been one of the key alliances that the United States has made in its history.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Wednesday in an interview on his country's state TV that he'd rather have Joe Biden, 81, in the White House than Donald Trump, 77, because the former was an old-school politician. What's Biden's relationship with the Russian leader been like?
Pretty chilly, I would say. I mean, he's called him a dictator. He's criticized his invasion of Ukraine as unprovoked and illegal. So, in other words, not very good. It's hard to see why he would prefer Biden to Trump.
Well, we're just 6 days away now from the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. They say they're running low on weapons. Meanwhile, Congress hasn't yet been able to get an aid package through. What might happen if Ukraine doesn't get this military aid soon?
The White House is already saying that we're seeing the effects of this lack of aid. The last shipment of aid came late last year, and without Congress approving the $60 billion package that the White House has asked for and the Senate has approved, we're going to see shortages of air defense missiles that are needed to knock down the drones and missiles that Russia has launched. And even more critically, it came up in a recent briefing by John Kirby at the White House. With a lack of artillery shells, Ukraine is already starting to lose some of the ground that it's clawed back from Russia. So without some sort of aid coming fairly quickly in the next weeks or months, Ukraine is going to have a lot of difficulty holding on to what ground it has and thwarting a Russian advance.
Tom Vanden is USA Today's Pentagon correspondent. Tom, thank you so much for sharing your insights here.
You're welcome, Dana. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. I'm Dana Taylor. I'll see you next time.